It is said with truth that every building is constructed stone by stone, and the same may be said of knowledge, extracted and compiled by many learned men, each of whom builds upon the works of those who preceded him. What one of them does not know is known to another, and little remains truly unknown if one seeks far enough. Now I, Resken, take my turn as mason, carving what I know to place one more stone in the great bastion of knowledge that has been built over the centuries both within and without the confines of high charity. A bastion raised by countless hands that came before, and which will, no doubt, continue to rise with the aid of countless hands yet to come. I was a communications officer for a time, learning the arts of observation, spying, and obtaining treasured secrets. With those secrets, I came to serve in the imposing palace of the hierarchs as a buffer between the exalted high prophets and lesser prophets seeking an audience. And more recently, I had the honor of leading Covenant troops across the surface of the holiest monoliths in our galaxy, the Sacred Ring, only for it to be ravaged by the human interlopers. And I am now being considered as an aide to a hierarch, the High Prophet of Truth, to serve the most holiest of vicars in our great empire. Yet, as auspicious as these accomplishments may seem, the blood that courses through my veins is that of historians, great masons who have shaped the course of the Sanshayum across generations. Thus did I desire nothing less to become one of them, to read of far places and long-dead men, to gaze at the stars and measure the passing of cycles. And so I did. Even now I am crafting a work of mine own, a work on the history of our glorious covenant, that humble but lettered men might read, and read to their wives and children, so that they would learn of things both good and wicked, just and unjust, great and small, and grown wiser as I have grown wiser. Yet, I would be remiss if I did not make an account of one of the finest historians of the earliest days of the Covenant, a prophet whose deeds ensured the continuation of the Sanshayum for ages yet to come. My ancestor, the prophet of inner conviction. And so now I set myself to work once more at my forge, to make new and notable matter of the great works he has done, as written in his own words. Words that have only recently been found in an environmentally protected chest, hidden in my family's storage vault here on High Charity. Important writings lost for all those dusty millennia. What follows herein is the deeds of my esteemed forebear, as told in his untold history of the Rending, and so on. Many will denounce what I have written here as lies and blasphemies, but in the end I believe that the need for truth and discovery must surely prevail over sheer ignorance. I have always sought clarity, hence the name I chose for myself. With that, this is the life of the prophet of inner conviction, Mken Scre'ah'ben. As with all Sanshayum during this time, Mcken was born in the dark, gloomy, and majestic halls of the Dreadnought, a great keyship of the holy forerunners that guided his people for centuries. For he came from a long line of reformists who had commandeered the ancient vessel and launched it into the stars in the waning days of the War of Wills. Like myself, he was dedicated to the study and understanding of his people's history and its intersection with that of the Forerunners. In his earliest years, Mken Scre'ah'ben dreamed of a career as a relic historian and would often ponder at many ancient Forerunner designs and holographic imagery of our lamented homeworld, Janjur Qom. For a time, his name was nearly placed within the roll of celibates, a list designating those who were not approved for reproduction, an institution that endures to this very day. In Mcken's time, there were so few Sanshayum, at least in space, and there was a tendency to genetic blight among them, and in so doing, it was difficult to stay off the roll. Yet he managed to clear his name from the list, and in time he would take the Lady Chrysanda to wife. It was said that his love for Chrysanda was deep and long-abiding, and both longed to make of 2, 3, but they would have to wait for cycles for that to occur. And Mken Scre'ah'ben would eventually be met with other, greater dangers, however. When the Sanshayum made contact with the imposing Sangheili warriors on the unforgiving world of Ogathon, a great slaughter occurred on both sides, and the planet was ravaged and devastated in what came to be known as the desecration of Ogathon. And so began the War of Beginnings as it is known today. Mcken was thrust into the conflict as the High Lord of Sacred Relics, charged in the protection and evacuation of Holy Forerunner artifacts from the heretical Sangheili. One of his most notable campaigns took place on Anvil, a Forerunner world known as the Planet of Blue and Red, where his forces were opposed by an accomplished Sangheili commander called Usa Zealous. As he and his steward held a precious holy temple and plotted how to deal with this field commander, a squadron of Sangheili assassins ambushed the High Lord underneath his own position and nearly succeeded in killing him, only for him to escape to an emergency pod that managed to reach orbit. His steward, however, was not so fortunate. The dreadnought scoured the site and cleansed all the Sangheili there, but Usa Zealous would live to fight another day. In his writings, he is said to have been gladdened by this, for it was his hope that this brilliant commander might one day act as a liaison for peace, for unlike most of his peers, he respected the Sangheili and held a desire to work more closely with this proud warrior species. He would soon get that opportunity. The war dragged on for generations, until at last the Sanshayum finally understood they could not prevail against the Sangheili, as their opponents developed more advanced weapons and ships to counter the might of the dreadnought. The Sangheili, perhaps tired of war, also wished to see an end to the fighting. Following the dispossession of the tyrannical pervading stone, the wisest of both races prevailed, and the chief rulers on both sides, Breaking Shadow and Pelisar the Strident, met and agreed to terms. With the signing of the Writ of Union, the War of Beginnings drew to a close, and the time of the Covenant began. With the rise of this new order, High Lord Mken Scre'ah'ben became the Minister of Relic Safety under a new sobriquet, the Prophet of Inner Conviction, for his habit of holding sermons emphasizing intrinsic purity. The signing of the Writ of Union, the end of countless cycles of ceaseless bloodshed, and the exhortations of the Great Journey had won over most of the Sangheili to this new covenant. But there are always some who will not be moved. Hardly had the inscriptions of the writ dried when the naysayers, the doubters, the heretics began to arise. Unifying them all was none other than Usa Zealous himself, Inner Conviction's old adversary. In his eyes, Usa saw the writ as nothing more than an act of surrender, which was decried as shameful to a Sangheili warrior. Furthermore, he saw the Great Journey was but another tool of deception by Mcken's people, so that they may lord over his own. In so doing, he instigated a civil war upon Sanghelios, a civil war that was quickly defeated when the High Clans raised the Zealous Keep low and drove the outlaw Clayton into hiding. The Prophet oversaw efforts to assassinate this rebel leader, but without result. Indeed, Zealous would take his band of rebels far away from Sanghelios, to a forlorn corner of the galaxy, well out of reach of this burgeoning new covenant, plotting to instigate a new rising. Such matters were far from the Prophet of Inner Conviction's concerns, however, as he navigated through a den of serpents on the partly built High Charity. News soon reached him that the hierarchs of the Covenant had fashioned a new ministry, the Ministry of Anticipatory Security, headed by Erno Custo, Mken's longtime political rival. Shortly after his rise to minister, Custo contacted the Prophet of Inner Conviction and revealed that he was aware of Chrysanda's recent pregnancy and his prior history on the roll of celibates. Custo threatened to use his new ministerial powers to place Mcken back on the roll and punish his lady wife harshly. However, Custo offered Scre'ah'ben an opportunity to make him forget the incident by leading an expedition to Janjur Qom to obtain 2 ancient artifacts: the purifying vision of the Holy Path, a special forerunner luminary, as well as gather female Sanshayum so that they may return to High Charity as new breeding stock. This was not the first time such a mission was proposed. Indeed, Mcken had once crossed not only Erno but also the High Prophet of Excellent Redolence, and had gone to the other 2 hierarchs to overrule a previous plot to kidnap females from Janjur Qom. This new mission would be a volunteer recruitment, however. But Mcken was not as enthusiastic as this brazen new minister. He vehemently opposed the mission and the acquisition of these mysterious relics. A dubious proposition at best, but Erno and Excellent Redolence held the fates of both his beloved Chrysanda and their unborn child in his hands, and with great reluctance, he accepted the charge. Aboard the stealth corvette the Vengeful Vitality, he set out for the ancient cradle world of all Sanshayum. Of the deeds done in that great expedition, we know well. Not since the War of Wills had a reformist Sanshayum set foot upon the soil of Janjur Qom. But it is said that as the Prophet of Inner Conviction embraced the majesty of his lost homeland, its gravitational force was punishing to him and his fellow Sanshayum, Captain Vervum Lacoser, as if Janjur Qom herself was chiding her lost children for abandoning her. Yet their Sanghili escorts and their Huragok remained undaunted. Their first task was recovering the prized relics that was of great importance for the journey, located in the Grotto of the Great Transition. Curiously, when the party arrived at the site, Inner Conviction noted among his writings that while inspecting a lintel, he spotted 2 strange hieroglyphs. One clearly depicted a Sanshayum, but the other, based on his description, it seems he saw a human depiction amongst these hieroglyphs. Surely this is some misinterpretation on my part, but if true, it suggests that in the Dawn Age, our ancestors and the humans were once allies. Madness for me to write this, for even now the Covenant is making war upon these creatures, and such a revelation would surely fracture our great hegemony. But I digress. With the able assistance of the Huragok, floats near ceiling, and its young Sanghili translator, Vil Kithami, they managed to not only find the purifying vision, but its accompanied luminary as well. This luminary showed them not only the sacred rings across the galaxy, but a massive installation that we came to learn was the Ark, the final home of the ancients before their ascension to divinity. For some time, Mcken's faith in the journey began to falter. Well, before the expedition, and he doubted the belief in the nature of the sacred rings. But when he gazed upon these holy images, his faith was renewed, and in his heart, he became the Prophet of Inner Conviction once more. Before they could leave with their prize, however, Inner Conviction was betrayed by Vervum and his Sanghili escort, both agents of the Ministry of Anticipatory Security of Erno himself. The minister meant to have Mcken killed and have his agent make off with the relics and the females and claim all the glory for himself. But the youth, Vil Kithami, acted quickly. He fired a bolt of plasma into the forest, alerting the Stoics of their presence, and sealed himself, my ancestor, and the Huragok inside the grotto. Vervum was killed, and the lone Sanghili was taken alive by the savage Stoics. With their opposition removed, The Prophet of Inner Conviction moved swiftly towards the second stage of the mission: acquire the female recruits. In the village of Krellum were several such willing candidates. History remembers them as the needful maidens, but to Mcken, they were simple women who sought a better life beyond the cruelty of their stoic masters. Through great adversities such as the fearsome stoic Folesteed patrols, the females were recovered and were swiftly transported to the vengeful Vitality. But when all seemed to be well, a blast sent by the Stoics began to break open one of the compartments of the ship, where the females and the luminary were kept. As Inner Conviction moved to save a female in distress along with the holy artifact, he realized he could not save both. And in doing so, he saved the female, but at the cost of losing the luminary for all time. Once cleared from the range, they departed from Janjur Qom, never to return again. Later, Mcken was heard to say that the Sanshayum homeworld was the most dangerous place he had ever visited. The danger was not at an end, however. When he returned with the purifying vision and the maidens, he was sharply questioned by the hierarchs for the loss of the luminary. He would have faced unjust punishment, had it not been for the timely intervention of his old friend and ally, Qom, a former hierarch. He claimed that the gods had judged the Covenant unready for divine transcendence, and that it was due to the meddling of the Ministry of Anticipatory Security that the mission went awry. Thus it was dismantled, and its former minister sternly punished, though the details of which have been since lost, and so the Prophet of Inner Conviction was deemed blameless for the loss of the relic, and would soon gain immortality in the annals of history for ensuring the healthy propagation of Sanshayum for countless ages yet to come. And to Mcken, the lives of his family were spared. But when all seemed well, news reached the ears of the hierarchs that the heretic Usa Zealous was found within the confines of a shield world of the gods. Such a blasphemous act could not be borne, and Excellence Redolence seized the moment and dispatched Inner Conviction to this world to finish what he had started all those cycles ago and bring these rebels to heel. With a sizable fleet, the Prophet of Inner Conviction arrived at the installation the Sangheli dissidents had rechristened as the Refuge. Ultimately, my ancestor chose to treat with Usa himself, an act of extreme heresy. Yet such was his respect for his old opponent that he desired a peaceful resolution to this pointless quarrel. Though this came without result, for Usa's two hearts were hard with suspicion and determination. This resulted in an initial invasion of the Refuge, one that was swiftly repelled by the rebels who had come to call themselves the Usans, in veneration of their leader. Then, in the act of mad folly, the outlaw Khaidon triggered a mass self-destruction of the Shield World and all its inhabitants, a great calamity that is now simply known as the Rending. With the destruction of the rebellion and the loss of all the priceless relics, Mcken turned a blind eye to all the potential gain and glory and returned to high charity. Curiously, amongst his writings he entertained the possible notion that the Usans might yet have survived the supposed destruction of their colony. If so, he was in no great eagerness to see if he was correct, for he longed to be in the warm embrace of his beloved wife, at the cost of letting his old enemy live in undisturbed peace. Could the Refuge truly have endured such a catastrophic event? Could the descendants of the ancient Usans endure to this very day? It may be so, but there is no evidence to suggest that, and the Usan system is now within the Scarlet borders, forbidden to all. Elsewhere, I shall endeavor to sift what grain can be found from the chaff within my ancestors' accounts. In time, the gods finally smiled upon Mken Scre'ah'ben and his beloved wife, for their precious child was finally born. He would spend the remainder of his life in content as a devoted historian and loving husband and father. His line would endure throughout the ages of the Covenant, all the way to me, the Prophet of Clarity. To this day, his deeds would be perceived by many as nothing more than myth and legend. Those who say are so ignorant, for his actions ensured the virality of the Covenant hegemony when it was at its very infancy. But even still, I'd take a tremendous risk writing these words, as heretical as they may sound. Thus, as my ancestor, Mken Scre'ah'ben did with his own accounts, I will keep them locked away, at least for now.